What do you do when you find a ghastly living in the vent inside your own house? Because honestly, I was not ready for that at all. It started with one weird thing. There was one room in my apartment that was always freezing, not just cold, unnaturally cold. Like tea would go cold in a couple of minutes, and by the evening there was frost on the window. At first I thought it was bad heating or some problem with the ventilation, but then I noticed something worse. The cold didn't feel random. It felt like something in that room was causing it. One night I finally got tired of guessing, grabbed a flashlight and started checking every corner. Then I pointed the light at the vent near the bottom of the wall and just froze. Two little eyes were staring back at me from the darkness, and I saw it, a tiny ball of purple gas, a real ghastly, and honestly it didn't look scary. It looked more like it was scared that I had found it. The second the flashlight hit it, it pulled back and almost disappeared into the vent. Almost, because one little eye was still peeking out at me, and in that moment I realized two things. First, there was somehow a ghost Pokemon living inside my wall, and second, there was no way this story was going to end normally. Obviously, I wasn't about to stick my hand inside a vent where a ghastly was hiding, so instead, I grabbed a piece of strawberry from the kitchen and placed it right under the vent. Then I just sat on the floor and waited. For a few seconds, nothing happened. Then those two little eyes appeared again in the darkness. Ghastly slowly floated out, hovered above the strawberry, and stared at it like it was trying to decide if trusting me was a good idea. It drifted a little closer, and the next second, the strawberry just vanished into its purple mist. And that's when I realized two things. First, Ghastly absolutely loves strawberries. And second, I might have just discovered the weirdest way to make a new friend. After that strawberry, everything changed. At first, he just hovered nearby, like he was still deciding if I could be trusted. But a couple of days later, I started noticing him everywhere in the apartment. Sometimes he would float into the kitchen while I was cooking and just hover above the counter, watching everything I did. Other times, I'd see him out of the corner of my eye in the hallway, and when I turned around, he'd already be up near the ceiling like he had always been there. And the longer he stayed, the bolder he got. One time I was making ramen and turned around for a second to grab a spoon. When I looked back, half the noodles were gone. Apparently the smell of food was like a full meal for him. In fact, every night after that, he would float nearby while I watched TV or got ready to sleep. And at some point, I realized something strange. This tiny ghost had already decided that this place, and maybe me, belonged to him now. Ghastly turned out to be a real little troublemaker. He loved causing small bits of chaos around the apartment. Sometimes I wouldn't even understand what had happened, but sooner or later I'd realize he definitely had something to do with it. And somehow he always managed to look completely innocent, like none of it was his fault, but all of that was funny. Right up until one evening, because one night something showed up outside the house that definitely wasn't funny. It looked like it hadn't wandered here by accident. It slowly started moving toward me, lowering its head like it was getting ready to attack. And that's when something happened that I really didn't expect. Luckily, that Pokemon eventually backed off, and honestly, in that moment, I wasn't even looking at it anymore. I was looking at Ghastly, because that little ghost, who had just been causing harmless chaos around my apartment not long ago, had just placed himself between me and something dangerous. And yeah, maybe he didn't look like the strongest fighter in the world, but in that moment, he protected me, and that was what mattered. To be honest, I felt so grateful that I immediately decided to reward him. I brought him a huge bowl of strawberries, and he completely lost his mind with happiness. Then I did something else I had wanted to try for a long time. I gave him a hug. My arm still passed right through him just like before, but somehow this time it didn't feel strange anymore. It felt different. In that moment I realized something. We weren't just sharing the same apartment anymore. We had become a team. After that night, Ghastly grew even more attached to me. He rarely drifted far away, appeared beside me more often, and even seemed calmer, almost like he understood that he wasn't just looking out for himself anymore. But that was also when I started noticing something else. After that night, something about him had changed. Not on the outside, not yet, but there was more confidence in him now, more strength. And I had this strange feeling that what had happened was only the first step, because whatever was coming next was going to be a lot bigger. And with that confidence came a bit more attitude. He caused more trouble, moved around the house more boldly, and seemed even more attached to me. That's when I realized something important. If he was getting stronger, I had to start training him before he became completely uncontrollable. So I began teaching him simple things: when to stay back, when to come closer, and how to actually listen when I called him. At first, he clearly thought it was just a game. Sometimes he listened, sometimes he just floated there with that innocent look like he had no idea what I wanted. But over time, he started understanding, and the more he learned, the clearer it became that he was growing stronger. But that's when a new problem appeared, because not long after that, another Pokemon showed up near the house. And this one was much more dangerous than the last. Ghastly tried to protect me again, but this time it became obvious. And right then, something happened that I had never seen before. Ghastly began to change, and evolved into Haunter. After that fight, everything ended pretty quickly. The new Haunter was completely different, faster, stronger, and clearly knew what it was doing. A couple of attacks later, the wild Pokemon realized it had picked the wrong place to start trouble. It backed off and disappeared into the darkness. Of course, things didn't end without a little damage. Half of my yard looked like a small tornado had passed through it, and a couple of the neighbors' fences, along with one unlucky street lamp, definitely didn't survive the night. But the important part was that we were both okay. Standing there in the middle of the mess, I looked at Haunter and realized this wasn't the same little Gastly I had once lured out with a piece of strawberry. He had grown stronger and a lot more confidence. But with that strength came a new habit. Haunter started using his ghost abilities much more often. He could pass through walls, appear in the most unexpected places, and honestly, he seemed to really enjoy scaring people, especially my friends. One time a friend came over, turned the corner in my hallway, and Haunter floated right out of the wall behind him. Let's just say he didn't come back for a while after that. But with me, Haunter was different. He still followed me around the house, hovered nearby when I was eating, and he still went crazy for strawberries. Only now, he wasn't a tiny ghost anymore. He was a real partner. After another 2 months of training, everything finally settled. By that time, Haunter and I weren't just partners anymore. We had become real friends. He wasn't the random ghost I had once discovered in my house. Now we spent almost all of our time together. We went on walks in the evenings, trained outside, and sometimes just sat in the yard watching the sky get darker. Somewhere along the way, it became obvious that we were never really apart anymore. He was always nearby, sometimes right beside me, sometimes hiding in the shadows, but I always knew he was there. Of course, he still liked causing a little trouble now and then. Sometimes he scared random people walking by, sometimes he appeared in the most unexpected places, and sometimes he just hovered next to me while I was eating, hoping I'd bring out more strawberries. But by then, all of that had just become part of our normal life, and honestly, I couldn't even imagine what life was like before he showed up.